Welcome, hoş geldiniz. I'm Eylem Taşdemir, Program Manager at Columbia Global Centers Istanbul, one of the 9 global centers around the world established to promote and facilitate the collaborative and impactful engagement of Columbia University's faculty, students, and alumni with the world. Our main objective is to connect the local with the global, to create opportunities for shared learning, and to deepen the nature of global dialogue. Today, in collaboration with the International Press Institute, it's our great pleasure to have distinguished experts who will share their expertise on fundings and media and its impact on quality journalism. Just one housekeeping item before we get started. As we are providing simultaneous translation during today's event, I will say a few words about that in Turkish and then continue in English. Etkinlik İngilizce dilinde gerçekleşecektir ve etkinlik süresince simultane çeviri hizmeti sağlanacaktır. Zoom ekranlarınızın sağ alt köşesinde bulunan Interpretation ikonuna tıklayıp çeviri hizmetinden faydalanabilirsiniz. Türkçe çeviriyi dinlemek için Türkçe dilini seçmelisiniz. Sorularınızı Türkçe ya da İngilizce dillerinden birinde ekranın alt kısmında bulunan Q&A kutusu aracılığıyla bizlere ulaştırabilirsiniz. So there will be translation into Turkish. So if you would like to listen to the Turkish translation, please go to the interpretation icon at the bottom corner of the screen and select the Turkish option. We have also shared this instruction in the chat box. So thank you to our translators today, Işıl Demirakın and Sungur Savran. Without further ado, I give the floor to Onur Sazak, who will moderate today's panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eylem, and I also would like to extend my thanks to my colleagues at IPI and Columbia Global Centers Istanbul for organizing this incredibly timely event. And I also want to pass my thanks to the translators for the wonderful job that they are going to do. And I also want to welcome our online audience who are joining us from around the world. I'm Onur Sazak. I work as Turkey-based project coordinator at IPI. Today we are going to talk about the importance of diverse and independent funding for the sustainability of free and quality journalism in the world. Of course, the focus is mostly going to be on Turkey and the Philippines, as Dr. Coronel is going to be joining us, and one of her expertise is actually on the Philippines. The topic has become more relevant and current given the economic side effects of the pandemic and the receding resources available to the nonprofit sector across the world. These trends are also exacerbated by the growing number of independent critical media outlets, which are increasingly diverging from traditional outlets such as print and broadcast media and reestablishing their operations on online platforms. Especially in repressive political environments, this trend of going digital understandably helps media organizations to report independently and freely on questionable government practices and issues that are critical to public interest. However, as we are going to find out at today's event, lately staying financially independent and producing objective and quality news hasn't been easy. In fact, it requires reliable, transparent, and diverse sources of capital more than ever. Of course, access to such resources is only a part of the challenge. Even if an organization secures vital funds, it may not be out of the woods yet. On the contrary, a news organization, especially if it's funded by international organizations, may find itself at the epicenter of a political and moral storm, instigated often by public perception on its revenue sources. It may be accused of serving foreign interests, either by its peers or the ruling elite. Worse, it may be subjected to severe government regulations put in place to stifle objective and critical reporting. To take on these issues, we are joined by a truly distinguished panel of experts. Allow me to introduce them first, then I will ask my first round of questions. And please do not forget to type your questions for us. So on the third round, we can take the direct questions from our audience. And I will direct them to the speakers one by one. Let me start by introducing Dr. Sheila Coronel. She is the director of the Stabile Center for Investigative Journalism at Columbia University, and she's the chair of the Media Development Investment Fund board. Dr. Coronel has written and edited more than a dozen books on the Philippines, freedom of information, and investigative journalism. She has trained journalists around the world and written investigative reporting textbooks for journalists in Southeast Asia and the Balkan region. She speaks frequently at international investigative reporting conferences and writes about global investigative journalism. Barbara Triomfi is the executive director at IPI. She joined the organization in 2000 as a press freedom advisor for the Asia-Pacific region, where she had previously studied and worked for over 4 years, carrying out research in the field of human rights and freedom of expression. Later, as press freedom manager, she oversaw IPI's global press freedom monitoring, and she coordinated IPI's global advocacy. With an academic background in international relations and human rights, Ms. Triomfi has taught courses at Webster University, Vienna in media ethics, media literacy, and cultural diversity and the media. Kaya Heise is the news coordinator at Medyascope. Mr. Heise started his professional life as a journalist in 1997 as an intern in Star TV in Istanbul, and he has won numerous awards with his reporting on Afghanistan and Iraq wars in the early 2000s. After years of working in war zones, Kaya became the Azerbaijan country manager of MOB Construction. It's a Turkish construction company. And in May 2014, Kaya helped found PR İletişim, a PR and media productions company. Before joining Medyascope in 2019, Kaya worked as a freelance journalist. So let me turn to Dr. Coronel and ask my first question. Dr. Coronel, as the chair of a prominent international organization that provides loans and small equities to media organizations, could you tell us why diverse and accessible funds are important for the development of independent and quality media around the world? What business and investment models are available? And what are the opportunities and disadvantages associated with each?
Thank you so much, Anur, and thank you to IPI and to the Columbia Global Center in Istanbul for inviting me here. So let me first say, so that we have some basic consensus about the terms that we're using, what we mean by independent media and why independent financing is crucial to the continued sustainability of independent media. So what I mean, or what most people mean when they say independent media, is independent from the government, from big business interests, from political parties and political factions. In other words, from any vested interests. Independent media around the world have been at the front lines of the defense of democracy, especially recently when we've seen the rise of autocratic and populist leaders all around the world. They carry basically the torch of the watchdog press, and we know them. You know, for example, that our Nobel Prize winners this year, Maria Ressa and Dmitry Muratov, are heads of independent media companies. Rappler, which is an independent news site in Manila, was founded by a journalist. And a lot of these independent media companies have in fact been founded by journalists rather than entrepreneurs. And it's the same for Novaya Gazeta, which is a newspaper, an online site published out of Moscow. So they are, so most of them are small. They're not large media conglomerates. They are very focused on politics, corruption, accountability. Many of them have taken advantage of the democratic openings in the 90s, the 2000s, and the 2010s. So for example, the latest, one of the most recent examples would be Myanmar, which opened up in around 2005, 2006, and we saw then the flowering of independent media organizations, including exile media that returned to Myanmar in order to operate there. So we have Democratic Voice of Burma, originally headquartered in Oslo, staffed by exiled journalists. They went back to Myanmar, and unfortunately, because of the coup, they have gone back into exile. And so what I just want to say is that independent media is crucial to democracy in terms of holding power to account, in terms of being the watchdog for society, and also being a forum for a free forum for public discussion and debate. But they have seen in recent years sort of very existential challenges. And in fact, the entire media industry itself is being challenged now. Early this year, the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, said the pandemic could be a media extinction event. He said newspapers alone lost $30 billion in revenue all around the world. So the pandemic exacerbated already long-standing challenges that affect the viability, especially of independent media, which are not supported by business or political interests, right? So first of this is the collapse of the business models that have traditionally supported journalism, such as advertising, which are now being sucked up all around the world by tech companies. The media as an industry is losing its advertising base to tech companies like Facebook, Google, et cetera, Then, of course, there have been changes in the information landscape, where a lot of the work of independent and, in fact, professional media is being drowned out by disinformation, propaganda, fake news, et cetera. And then, of course, in recent years, there have been a ramping up of political pressures as as we see the democratic backsliding all around the world. There have been takeovers, closures, pressures on advertisers, physical threats to journalists, online threats, lawsuits. Independent media have been sued for tax evasion, money laundering, getting money from foreign donors, et cetera. So they've been demonized along with the rest of the media much more, but demonized much more intensely and subject to greater pressure. Funding is key to the sustainability of independent media. Without an independent revenue base, the media would be subject to even greater pressures. And funding, I believe, is where it is very difficult. You can get press freedom support, you can get support for exile, for everything, but funding on a long-term basis, funding independent media remains a challenge. So thank you for mentioning that I'm the chair of the board of the Media Development Investment Fund, which started in 1995 to fund sustainable media. MDIF was formed at the time when there was an opening of democratic space all around the world. The fall of authoritarian regimes in the South, as well as the collapse of the Soviet Union, meant openings in the media that allowed independent, mostly a lot of them journalists, to set up news organizations. So MDIF was set up because there were so many of these people who wanted to take advantage of the new freedoms to set up media companies, but they didn't have the financing. So it started out as a loan fund, offering loans to those journalists so they can buy printing presses, radio transmitters, set up offices, et cetera, loans that were being given at a concessionary basis. The problem was in many of these countries, loans were very high interest rates, and new media entrepreneurs could not avail themselves of those loans because the costs were just too high. The reality is that in many parts of the world, the media market is not an even playing field. State and crony-owned media, supported by state money and crony business money, dominate media markets. So the playing field is very skewed. The aim of the MDIF is to level the playing field by offering concessionary loans, very low interest, small grants, and also investing, meaning buying shares in media companies, because there are no shareholders who are willing to take the political or business risks of investing in new politically independent and very often very controversial media organizations. So the idea is to allow media companies to compete in a more even market. And since 1995, MDIF has given about $225 million in financing, mostly loans and investments that would allow media entrepreneurs to buy printing presses, transmitters, computers, hire staff, set up news operations, innovate in new forms of disseminating disseminating information. We are in 42 countries and we have more than 140 clients. What MDIF does is not just give money, financial support, but also technical and business support. Training this new generation of media entrepreneurs in new business and revenue models, training them in how to manage, how to set up their books of accounts, how to deal with boards, etc., etc. The idea is to nurture media entrepreneurs because, as you know, most of these people are journalists with very little business experience, but they set up media companies, so it's helping them be able to be enterprising and be viable. And MDIF studies have shown that MDIF financing has helped grow revenues by an average of 200% over 5 years. So we hope many of these media companies are going to be viable, but they are under tremendous political pressure. Rappler in the Philippines has had to spend, for example, a lot of money just on lawsuits to defend itself from charges that it's actually owned by foreigners, because foreign ownership is not allowed in the Philippines. They've been sued for tax evasion, cyber libel. It's the same all around the world. We fund an independent news organization in Malaysia called Malaysia Kini, and they've been sued almost their entire life. One of the organizations we fund in El Salvador, El Faro, is now undergoing financial and tax audits by the government. And it's been accused of money laundering because it's been receiving foreign funds. So our attempts, especially in recent years, to breed and nurture a new generation of media entrepreneurs are increasingly being undone by unfriendly governments who say the independent media is the enemy. But we keep doing it and thinking of new ways to support these new entrepreneurs. And one of them is we recently launched a fund in Europe called Pluralis. It is right now worth about 40 million euros. And the intent of Pluralis is to buy shares in independent media companies that are under threat of being bought out by state or crony interests. So in order to preserve the independence, we buy shares, maybe 20, 30% of the shares in this company, so that to prevent hostile takeovers. Right now, we've already bought shares in a newspaper in Poland and Slovakia, and we're looking for new clients to be able to save them from what we call media capture. I'd like to end by saying that this model of using loans, equity, and grants to fund independent media is now increasingly being seen as a way to preserve media freedom. There is this international fund for public interest media that has been launched. The aim is to raise $30 billion. That's a lot of money, but so far the US government during the Democracy Summit committed to putting in $30 million in the fund. And the idea is to raise even more money so that we can grow this model and have a mechanism that will be multilateral, so no single donor or no single government controls it, that there's an independent board, and that there's going to be transparent criteria and procedures for applying to the fund, so that it's not seen as a tool of Western interest or anything. It's a challenge to prove the independence of it, but what I just want to end is that there are existing models for being able to do this already, and that we are ready to take off as more and more people and more donors and more governments around the world realize that this is really a moment of existential threat for independent media. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cornell. In fact, I'm so glad that you brought up Pluralis. I had seen that on Twitter, and I meant to ask you about that, but I think that's a great initiative, what it does in terms of helping and investing in independent media organizations against hostile takeovers. But maybe if we have time, we can elaborate more on that. Let me turn to Barbara and ask you more about the grant side of international NGO assistance to local media organizations. You've been running a very reputable international non-governmental organization that has provided tremendous support for the development of free and quality journalism around the world since the 1950s. So could you tell us about the advantages and maybe challenges of supporting free press through grants and other forms of assistance that IPI has provided in the last 60 or so years, even 70 years now. In your experience, has accessing grants become easier or more difficult over the last few years? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So honor and yes, and thank you to the thank you to the Columbia Global Journalism Center for co-organizing this event. Yeah, as Sheila has very clearly highlighted, we have seen a shift, a change in not only in the media landscape, but also very much in the way the media landscape, in the way journalism is being supported and funded. You know, when IPI was born, if you want, 70 years ago, and for many years after that, the media industry was a powerful industry, and was there as, you know, the fourth estate, also supported by great economic power that allowed it to be independent and to serve its role as the fourth estate. So speaking eye to eye to governments and to powerful institutions, this obviously has started crumbling down when approximately 10 years ago, the crisis, the collapse of the business models Sheila was talking about started. And that's when we saw a lot of news organizations starting to do major cuts, cutting on staff, cutting on various types of costs in order to continue operating. And then, of course, over the years, we have seen more anti-democratic governments coming in and taking advantage of this weakness to clamp down even more and add even greater pressure to the media in the many ways that Sheila has presented, through legal harassment, through economic, financial pressure, all sorts of things. But so the grants to the media started many years ago, as if you want. There's a very long tradition. When IPI was started, we one of the first programs we ran was even to support training of journalists in parts of Africa. And this is the type of support that was typically given to the media back then. But talking about more recent forms of support, when the collapse of the business models came in, and the first area where a lot of news organizations cut was investigative journalism. Investigative journalism is a very expensive form of journalism, and it requires a lot of resources. Journalists need to dedicate a lot of time to do the investigations, and sometimes nothing may come out. You know, the information you gather may not even be publishable. So as I said, it's an expensive form of journalism, and that's when various forms of grants started being created by foundations, in some cases by intergovernmental organizations, but mostly by foundations to support investigative journalism. And this is also the type of grants that IPI has been running through. For example, its IJ4EU program. It's a cross-border, again, a new approach to journalism, working cross borders and being much more efficient, in particular when doing investigative journalism, providing grants to do the work that the work that news organizations want to carry out in the form of projects. So basically, news organizations come to the donors report to IPI in the case of IJ4EU and say, this is an investigation we need to carry out. They explain why it is important, they explain what they hope to achieve, and they get money from that. The innovative aspect of how IPI has managed the granting in the IJ4EU, which is, by the way, funded primarily but not exclusively by the European Commission, but additionally to other private foundations such as the Open Society Foundations and others. The way we did it was to provide not only grants to do the journalistic work in the sense of the project the investigative project presented, but also ensure that as part of these grants, news organizations would be able to cover parts of their salaries, part of their core costs, because this was absolutely, a lot of news organizations were complaining and saying, maybe we get a lot of grants to do for certain projects, but we cannot run our organizations either in between or while we do this work. So this was, if you wanted, the change that IPI introduced, and that was very successful. Nevertheless, it remained, in the case of IJ4EU, it remains a 1 year, 1.5 year program. So it doesn't provide long-term support, which has been identified also by the news industry and by independent news outlets, which, as Sheila described, have been under great pressure. So the other forms of grants that we have seen also being given out on one, again, both by foundations and by governments, democratic governments, I would say, are aimed at supporting the news industry in their transition. So in their digital transition primarily. The digital transition, what is intended there is not only a change in the way you do journalism, a change in where you present your journalism, which platforms, but it's also very much a change in understanding how to support all this. Digital transition means that the advertisers pay much less money. A lot of the advertisers are lost to the social media platforms, and so you need to identify new ways to support all this. And I'm sure that Kaya will talk extensively about this. But typically, what we have seen recently, the primary form of support, additionally to the loans that Sheila mentioned or the grants the project grant that I mentioned before, is also looking for support through the audience. So going to the audience and asking them to support your work. And this is also the experience Sheila mentioned, Rappler in the Philippines or Novaya Gazeta. They're both organizations that have a very close relationship to their audiences. Maria Ressen even calls them the communities of support, I'm not mistaken, because these are the type of the community of audiences are those that provide financial support through subscriptions, through memberships, through all of that, but also they provide moral support in the moment the news organization is being attacked. Now, I'll just one last point I would like to make about what I see as a very positive consequence of this, which is in fact, a very dire media landscape, because we don't have a solution yet. But the positive development that we have seen in all this is that the news organization having news organizations that are funded through grants, through loans, through their audiences are required to have much higher levels of accountability. So the accountability and transparency on the other hand, which results obviously in better quality of the content. So the relationship with the audience is such that if you want the trust of your audiences, you need to tell them how you fund your work, how you do your work, where is your money coming from? And then we can talk more about, okay, what are the challenges in these contexts of receiving foreign funds or receiving funds from certain sources which may be considered problematic. So all of that is an added layer, but I still think that the degree of accountability and transparency that news organizations have had to put in place has been a very positive development. And it's bringing us to the type of journalism that absolutely we want. Is the journalism supported? Is the journalism done for the readers, supporting the public interest, and based on the core values of democracy, which is transparency and accountability? And I'll leave it there for now. Thank you. Thank you, Barbara. Actually, you've also given me a great opportunity to segue into Kaya's segment, especially Maria Resa's this communities of support is important, and also that you brought up the more moral aspect of it, not just financial, not just giving money to these organizations, but also just as you expressed in a time of let's say public backlash or some kind of severe government repression, your readership, your audience actually comes to your defense. Kaya, I know your organization in Turkey has been at the spotlight of this kind of reaction, but that's going to be the second part of my question in the next round. Let me just ask you, as somebody who manages Mediascope, which is, as far as I know, the first organization that diverged from the mainstream media in Turkey, established itself on digital platforms, and started providing critical and objective news, while the other organizations found it really difficult to do that because of the political climate in the country. So in terms of, I mean, just looking at it from the perspective of Mediascope, why are these sources of financing important for you? And what's your business model actually? Where do you get your money from? Let me just put it this way.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for having me here. And also thank you, Sheila and Barbara. Well, I mean, we get our money from our audience, from funding institutions, and partly from advertising. And we started out with an iPad, and then through supporters, we found a physical space where we then had the chance to put the iPad on a tripod and sit in front of it and do other stuff. And then people heard about us or watched us on YouTube, etc. And they came to us and said, we want to work with you and work for you. And we told them, we don't have any money. We can't pay you at the moment. They said, okay. So we started out like this, a very young team. And since 2015, the end of 2015, until now, we've now turned into, I think we're the biggest independent media organization in Turkey at the moment. We have around 50 staff, journalists, tech guys, editors, podcasters, etc. We cover all over Turkey. We have, again, physical presence in Ankara, the capital, in the southeastern city of Diyarbakır, and in Izmir, and also in the Black Sea region in the north of Turkey. And this is key for us because what the anti-democratization in Turkey has killed in terms of journalism is reporting, and it's field reporting. So you don't have any more reporters who go out and look for the story, listen to the people, uncover things that the public must hear. And this is what we are doing now. We have reinvigorated field journalism, reporting. It's not about the talking heads anymore or giving speeches about issues and analyzing stuff, but it's really about going and finding the story. But this is, of course, a matter of financing. I mean, news gathering is expensive, and not only investigative journalism is expensive. For us, investigative journalism will be our next step forward, I hope. But even, having reporters to travel all around Turkey and gathering the stories and telling the stories, it's really a huge financial problem. The transport, the accommodation, the equipment, everything. And so we depend on our audience because we give them good journalism, quality journalism, unbiased journalism. And of course, we tell our case to funding institutions who then also trust us, and they, mostly on a yearly basis, they provide funds for us. So we can keep this news gathering machine running. And while we are doing this, for the past year, since the pandemic, we seriously have started working on trying to develop a business model. And this is now, I'm a journalist for 26 years, but I've seen that this has to be prioritized now, and I'm really just more or less focusing on the business aspect, on how we could transform Mediascope into a self-sustainable, really good media organization that is independent, because we have to protect this independence. Our founder, he's a journalist, he's not a businessman. This is really what we are now looking in. And of course, the audience, our core audience, they provide the basis for us. We get now support via Patreon, and we have increased this around 100% this year. And also we get support via YouTube Join. And we have also actually readied our website for a subscription-based model, but we still have to see where Turkey is going, because you can't see very far in the political atmosphere in Turkey. And so we decide more or less to wait a little bit longer for this to understand what's going on. Are there going to be elections? Is there going to be a change in government? And this is not something we can foresee. So, but we have actually, technically, we are now, for example, ready for a launch for a subscription-based model. And this also means that we have to invest more and more in data, and also in people who understand data, who can understand the analytics of YouTube and Google, analyze all the trends, and deep dive into all the aspects of analytics these platforms can give us, and also, research and study, and maybe purchase also other software that would help us grow our audience and help us make this subscription-based business model in the future viable and sustainable. So we have to understand the audience, we have to understand who they are, we have to understand why they are with us, we have to understand what they want to read, what they want to hear, what they want to watch. So and for this we need, of course, people. And one major thing that we did just this month was, for the first time in the history of the company, we have hired even she's junior at the moment, but a data analyst. And it's very, very exciting to have her on board as well. And also, because we are producing so much content, and even the management of the content becomes a huge issue. Everything has to be editorially supervised, everything has to be analyzed. So we've also built a team for that, who only deal with the social media aspect of the content we are providing. Because in the end, we do news. Our product is news. I mean, we do text reports, we do video reports, we do hybrids of these, we do podcasts, and now we'll also venture into other stuff, animations, more graphics, more shorts, as they call it in YouTube's, and stuff like this. So this means we have to be always up to date with the technology. And this means we always have to have good people who understand not only the journalistic aspect of the job, but also the design, the graphics, and the data aspect of the job. And we are, for example, running for the past 2 years a project with Internews, where they assist us in building this subscription model and devising a business model. I mean, but it's going slow because Turkey is, politically speaking, it's very, very, I mean, I need to find the right word, but I mean, it's very hard for independent media to really survive here. And another problem is, I mean, we all say independent media, but here in Turkey, we actually, when we speak about independent media, we use the word opposition media, which I find as a journalist actually not correct. I mean, because journalists, inherently, we have to be in the opposition, or I don't know. But I mean, so the issue is that, and because of this polarized environment here, that when you are not on one of the poles, you find yourself in trouble a lot. And this is, I mean, we will talk about it later, but this is what happened to us in the summer when we were attacked, because we get funded by foreign institutions. But the problem here is that the attack, it didn't come from the government or something. It came from the opposition. So this was very interesting. And it also shows how difficult it is for media institutions like us, who want to have sustainability, who want to develop a business model, and who want to revive journalism here, have to face. So, I mean, for at least 2 more years, I think we will be more or less dependent on grants that we will hopefully continue to get. And after that, I think we will have a clearer look into the future, and we will have more space and time to develop this business model. I think that's all for now.
Not so quick. So I'm gonna start my follow-up round, just basically asking about the issue that you have risen about, you know, what happened over the last summer. So I know Medyascope was put on the spotlight for getting funded by an international philanthropic organization based in the United States. And even though you have been very transparent, your organization has been very transparent and disclosed the entire support information transparently on the website, the whole issue quickly escalated into, you know, a public reaction almost. And just like you said, you know, it was, I think it was stoked by other fellow journalistic organizations, internet-based media outlets, and it quickly made its way to the ruling elite. The presidential communications director basically commenting on the whole situation and saying that, you know, in the foreseeable future, all the foreign sponsored or foreign supported media organizations would be treated or registered as foreign agents, etc. And as we know, there's already a legislative work being done in the parliament. There is a bill that has been introduced to a subcommittee, but nobody knows how it's progressing or whether or not it's going to be taken up on the parliament floor. But I mean, the whole issue quickly escalated. So I think maybe I can just ask you to comment on this, to tell us about your organization's strategy to cope with such, I don't know what to call them, such defamation tactics or such questions being raised about the morality of receiving foreign funds. What are your thoughts on that, basically?
So I'm not going to take much of your time, but I have to put this, I mean, I have to tell you how this all started. We had the leader of the main opposition party, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu. He made a video where he said that he would, when they come to power, they would put a plan into motion and then send all refugees back to Syria within 2 years. And this was a huge video which gained incredible attraction. And we also made a report on that video, a plain report. Kılıçdaroğlu said this and said this. So we have a contributor who does a show on refugees here, on migration issues. She's an academic, and she tweeted something critical about this video, saying that this is not the correct way to approach this issue, that migration and forced migration it's a humanitarian problem and so on. So first she got attacked on Twitter and social media. And then because she's having a program on our station here, on our platform, we felt that the critique and the attack is slowly shifting to us. But because it's normal, I mean, if you're not on one of the polls, you can get attacked every day. So that was not the big issue for us. But then some Twitter accounts, they just hopped into our website and clicked on the Crest Foundation's logo, which we have listed there as one of our donors. And from there, you see the list of all the grants we get. And of course, Crest is grants. And the guy, whoever clicked on there, he just did a miscalculation and he wrote a huge number, like, I don't know, $460,000 per month that we get from Crest, which is actually not true. I mean, we get 400,000 over the last 6 years, maybe. And then this was picked up by a huge website in Turkey, Oda TV. And they put it into context and made a report about it. And like, it wasn't a tweet anymore, but it was a story. And then the attack started. I mean, that story broke like after midnight or something, as far as I can remember. And then we had for a week, we had like constant mentioning and stuff and this and that. And of course, the interesting thing was that most of the people who criticized us or attacked us or digitally lynched us, they weren't pro-government or something. They were from the opposition. And they said that with the money we get from the West, and especially from the US, we try to make sure that all refugees stay in Turkey, and that this is our main mission, protecting the rights of the refugees and making sure that they stay in Turkey. And of course, I mean, this grew and grew and grew, and then the government, they also felt the need to say something, and the communications director, he said that he would do this and do that, but we didn't say anything, because it became clear, I mean, the first day, that saying anything wouldn't help anybody, especially not us. So we just didn't do anything. we didn't block anybody. We didn't reply to anybody. When somebody called us and on the phone and asked for some comments, we said, nothing to see here. And a week later, it like faded. But what we did at that time was, of course, we engaged with our supporters. We wrote them and we organized a Zoom with them, with the YouTube joiners and also with the Patreon supporters, and told them the story, told them what is happening right now. Again, told them, because we do these Zooms, etc., we do them a lot of times. And we again told them how we get funded, who these institutions are, how much we get, and what we do with the money. So in the end, we kept, of course, I mean, our website traffic and our YouTube traffic, it exploded that month because everybody was curious about who we are and what we do. But we also increased our Patreon support and our YouTube join support. And this really showed that when you do good journalism and when you do a good job and you treat your supporters not like customers, so to speak, but really as people who are part of your team, with whom you tell that without them this would not be possible, what you are trying to build here, this really pays back. And this, I mean, of course, I mean, a couple of our colleagues, I mean, they were really unnerved by this. They didn't feel safe, but the support of these people, it showed that we are on the right way, and it showed again the importance of being an independent news organization. And we immediately got in touch with our funders and we told them what we're doing, our strategy, and we told them everything is fine and that we don't have any problems being funded by them. And then we launched a new campaign, and also we did a couple of videos. Rushan, our founder, he went live and he spoke about that we didn't care about this campaign, etc. So, but it shows that this was not the government. I mean, this was the effect of the polarization in Turkey created by the government. And everything what is not wrong, what is wrong here in Turkey can be used against you here. It might be the refugees, it might be the LGBTI community, it might be a report you do on corruption, everything. So the opposition, whatever that is, and the government, they have these divergent interests sometimes when they come together. And then it's really interesting. And this is how we try to survive here in Turkey. So we have to keep this, this unbiased, really quality journalism alive. We have to keep telling these stories. And for the moment, we are not able to do this without our supporters and without the funding institutions who give us grants. So, I mean, advertising, we have some advertising, hit income and Google ads income and all that other stuff, we get it, but it's not enough to keep us floating. And this is also why we want to build this subscription-based model but for that to also be, sustainable, we have to also create original and better content. This means we need better journalists, we need better video reporters, we need good data analysts, etc. So it's this very interesting period we are going through, and we continue to grow. And we always expect similar things to happen again, especially if we are going to have an early election next year. This will happen probably a bit more, but we count on our supporters, and we continue to count on our funders.
Thank you, Kaya. This was really illuminating on the events of last summer. But let me turn to Dr. Coronel and ask her if you also witnessed similar positioning of foreign funding in other countries. Maybe you can relate from the Philippines. From mostly maybe pro-government or anti-free media circles as a hindrance to free press. I mean, is different sources of funding, especially if they are based outside the country, are portrayed as such in the local journalism debates?
Well, I very much sympathize with Kaya's experience, because that indeed is happening all around the world. In Russia, where a lot of foreign donors have been tagged as undesirable, a lot of not just media organizations but NGOs that were able previously to operate are not able to do so anymore, because once you're tagged as an undesirable organization, you can't do any more operations. But what I want to say is that this is all part of an attack, usually by the state. If it's not foreign funding, they'll find something else. If powerful individuals or institutions want to find something against you, if it's not the source of your funds, it will be your private life, as has happened. It will be made up charges. The facts are not an impediment to attacks on journalists. In fact, journalists have been subject to so much fake attacks, regardless of what they do. Foreign funding is one vulnerability, because a lot of foreign foundations and donors and governments do fund independent media, because, as I said, independent media is very resource consuming. As Kaya said, it's very time consuming. It requires dedication, and building an audience without enough capital, without enough resources is very difficult, because even without printing presses or transmitters, the cost sizes of technology, of know-how, of paying very skilled people is still high. And given the collapse of business models, you really are not able to break even by just using advertising and membership. You need a certain amount of time to be able to do that. And this is why grants and funding are important. So my dilemma when I was in the Philippines and set up a nonprofit investigative reporting center was, we could get donations from local business houses, or we can get them overseas. Getting donations locally put us in much more conflicts of interest, because local businessmen would be involved in contracts with the government. They would be accused of corruption. They would be accused of environmental abuse. And that would put us in real trouble. Foreign funding actually gave us more independence, because if you get multiple funding sources from many different countries, it's very hard to say you are an agent of the US government or the Dutch government or of George Soros. So there are ways in which independent media organizations have protected themselves from accusations of being foreign agents. One, by getting multiple funding sources, not getting, say, more than 30% from any one funding source, but getting them from a range of sources, and having multiple revenue streams, including, and I'm glad Kaya emphasizes, including from your audience, because you have to show you have local support. So when I was head of the Philippine Center for Investigative Journalism, we had members who would give us $100 a year to support our work, to show we had to support not just of foreign donors, but also locally. And it's very, and now this whole membership thing is very big, subscription models. There are various ways to get, if not money, to get audience engagement. Maybe they will help you in the research. Maybe they will provide expertise. Maybe they will buy your, your t-shirts, your mugs. I'm selling t-shirts, mugs, whatever, to just to show that there is enough of a local base of community support. So yes, but my own feeling is, if you're not going to be attacked for your funding, you're going to be the aim of many of these strong men, these autocrats, is to destroy independent media, and they will do it in whatever way they can, and also to destroy civil society along with it, right? So that they will have full control. This is what autocratic rule is about. It's about controlling public discourse and controlling civic spaces, so that the strong men and the autocrats and their cohorts have monopoly over the civic space and public discourse. We see it happening in various ways all around the world. That's why there is a global erosion of democracy. It's because of the desire to control media and civil society, because they are the ones who are holding strongmen and autocrats accountable and demanding that they be transparent.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cornell. Barbara, you mentioned advertisement in the initial round, and we know that the state advertisement in, I think, many countries is an important source of revenue for media organizations, and it can be used as some way to coerce certain press organizations that the government does not necessarily agree with. So maybe you can talk about IPI's engagement in countries or places where media organizations are facing this risk of losing their revenue resources coming from the state ads, and maybe you can elaborate on what international organizations like yours can do to support such organizations facing similar risks.
Sure, thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, state ads and various forms of support that comes from the state has traditionally been an important source of revenue for news media, in particularly those operating at the local level. And the philosophy behind it is a very correct one. It's saying, the state needs plurality, or people need a plurality of voices, and in order to ensure that there is a plurality of voices that can survive, even the smaller players, the state needs to invest public money into the media market and ensure that plurality is available. So this has, certainly most of Western Europe, but not only, it has worked for many years. It has ensured the existence of a lot of news media operating at various levels, at a national, local, hyper-local level. And in a perfect system, the state, the funds that are being distributed, which are public funds, they come in the form of public support toward, typically, as I said before, toward printing, but in this nowadays can be also public support towards public funding supporting transitions, but also in the fame of state ads. They would come without any strings attached, so they would not influence the content, but simply allow the existence of various news outlets. This has become very problematic in many countries where, as you said, the government of today has used this tool, which has become a very powerful tool for many news organizations, is a core source of funding as a way to manipulate the content. So clearly making sure that the state ads or the public funds go to those media who are not critical or who are even a bit more favorable And this, as I said, especially at the local level, creates a media situation that is very, very problematic because because people have access to media which are completely biased and they're forced to be that, or they need to choose either to self-censor or to die. So this is a broken system, but yet the reason why I think is interesting is because, as I mentioned, and Sheila also referred to the International Fund for Public Interest Media, there is nowadays a rediscovered idea that public funds should support journalism. Journalism is there as a public good, is a core element of any democratic society, is a core element of election integrity, of the fight against disinformation. All of that cannot exist without journalism. So the public and the state need to play a role in ensuring that the journalism is independent, not only by ensuring that the laws of the country are there to create an environment that is favorable to independent journalists, but also potentially to provide additional support, financial support. So it is in this context that I think is really interesting that nowadays we redefine the principles upon which public funds can be distributed in a way that does indeed support the type of journalism that our societies need. And there are many discussions about it, linking it to press councils, as long as press councils are independent, linking it to, as I said before, to accountability systems, to codes of ethics, to quality. Quality is obviously a very difficult concept to define. So all of that, there is a lot of discussion, but I don't think we have a solution yet. But I do think it's a very, very interesting conversation that we are having these days, and we are going in that direction. And in the end, I do think that acknowledging that journalism is there as a public good, it gives value to it. Maybe I just wanted to go to a related issue that is picking up on some of the points that Kaya made. In the dependence on audiences that we have, and Kaya has highlighted the challenges of creating a model that is supported by audience in the Turkish and in Turkey's media environment. But other members from IPI have also highlighted the moral challenge that this presents. In the moment, you're one of the very few news organizations offering independent, unbiased news. Putting up paywalls, which is the only way to get, is one of the most common ways to get your audiences to pay for content and support your journalism, means preventing others who do not pay from getting the information that they very much need, in order to take part in the democratic conversation processes. So there is a moral element to that. That how do I operate if I do feel that I play a role in the society in supporting democracy? Then is it even ethical to limit the information that I'm putting out? So there is that conversation, which I think is really, really interesting. And the other element to it is again related to the dependence on audiences. To which extent do we, in order to please, if you want, our audiences, or in order to ensure that they stay with us, we strengthen the polarization that already exists in society? How much are we offering them content and opinions that strengthen their political opinions or their positions? And because we have seen from many news organizations that in the moment they have offered content that is very different from the type of ideological position that most of the audiences have, they lost audience. So how do we do this and in the process not strengthen polarization? So yeah.
Barbara, I think it's a great question, and I will give the floor to Kaya, because we have discussed that, I believe, And I know, Kaya, you are going to express this, but journalism is also a profession, even though it is providing public good in a way that it protects people's right to information, objective information and facts. But at the end of the day, I know that the journalists also have to eat, put food on the table, etc. But I know Kaya has explicit thoughts on this, so I'm going to let him speak.
Well, our aim is to keep our content always free. And because we believe that it is what this country needs when or if it wants to get back on a democratic track. And this quality journalism is something which has been missing in Turkey for many, many years. So the audiences, they need to hear about this. Of course, I mean, in these models, you have various types of asking the audience for money. And I mean, the thing is that we have to finalize our message, what we want to get out there, what we are going to ask the audience of why we want money from them. I mean, there will be no paywalls here at Mediascope. There will be other things. We want to build this bond with the audience. We want them to be a part of us on this road where we are going to. I don't know where this will lead us to, but it's going very, very well. And many of our supporters, they have been with us nearly since the start. And this is encouraging. So we can't suddenly act like a huge corporation and ask money after 10 or so read articles per month. So this is not the road we are going to go. But really, the financing it's the most crucial issue at the moment. Also here at Mediascope. I mean, it's the only thing I think about. It's not about the news anymore. It's about, I mean, what will happen, because I don't know, in 2 months, every year when approaches November and December, I'm like, okay, what's our status? Where are the funds? What's going on? Did that email come? Did they call you? Did you write them back, etc.? So this is really, I mean, a nerve-wracking period. I mean, okay, it's exciting. It's something very new what we do here in Turkey, but I mean, I don't consider getting foreign funds as an ethical issue. There's nothing ethical about it. It's not an ethical problem. It would become a problem if you would be funded by, like, I don't know, a fascist organization, some neo-Nazi types, some, I don't know, some institution which has vested interests in some issues. But this is not the case. And as Sheila pointed out, we try to diversify this income. We get income from Turkey-based NGOs. We get funds from US-based, from the European Union. So, and also if they want to give us money, we will also get money from the Open Society Foundation. There's nothing, I mean, we don't have an issue with that. And we tell our audience also this, that we don't have an issue with it. There is no ethical issue. Getting money from the Crest Foundation doesn't make you a CIA agent. It doesn't lead to us working for some undercover guys trying to topple the government and making sure that refugees stay in Turkey. I mean, it's so silly. But then we turn back, okay, to the people who tell us you are getting American money. So we ask them, okay, then give me Turkish money. Give me nice, good Turkish money. Where is the Turkish money? This is the question we ask. And no, there is no Turkish money. Nobody wants to pay for news. Nobody wants to fund an independent news organization. because it has never been done here. And if they do it, they will get into trouble. It's the same with advertisers. Everybody likes us. You know, we've got people coming in, big businessmen and like heads of companies, CEOs, all buddies with us. We get a lot of shoulder pats and, you know, you're doing a great job. I watched your video last night. Yeah, you should do this. You should do that. So, okay, I say to them, put an ad on. Give me a banner for 3 days. Nothing. He said, if I put this banner on, I might get in trouble. So then, of course, I will look for alternative sources of funding. And if it is in America, I will get it. If it is in the Philippines, I will get it. If it is on the moon, I will get it.
With that, since we haven't received any questions in our question and answer chat box, and we are approaching the end of the time allocated to us, maybe I can just take the prerogative of being the moderator and ask the final question to our distinguished speakers. What's your prediction for the future in terms of the funding of free and quality journalism? Are we going to see these communities of support increase, or with the economic hardship and externalities of pandemic, are we going to see more decline in funds available for journalism? And Kaya's bleak picture for Turkey has just inspired me to ask this question. You can go in any order.
Let me start if no one wants to take the question. I think there is increasing recognition, as Barbara said, that journalism needs to be supported by public funds. And I think we will see globally, I mean, the situation will be different for each country, but we will see globally more investments in terms of donor funds and even government development funds being put to support independent media in various ways, including training, press freedom support, technology support, et cetera, et cetera. There will be that. Even the big tech companies like Google are now, and Facebook are also now providing funds for media, recognizing the damage they had wrought. I think there will be increasing pressure on them to provide much more. I think a lot of ordinary citizens, a lot of businessmen are seeing that the gutting of the media, the lack of reporting resources is bad for society in general. And there is going to be a clamor for some sort of support, whether there are various forms of support. You know, outright grants and investments, loans is one thing, but there could also be tax subsidies. There could be, you know, in many parts of Europe, there are subsidies for people to buy or subscribe to news organizations. So there's all forms of public support. And maybe we think of the press as a cultural institution. And there's a lot of public, state, and citizen support for cultural institutions. But I also see increasing pressure, especially on independent media, increasing political pressure as there is increasing democratic erosion and democratic collapse. We're going to see in some countries, we're already seeing it in places like China, Russia, Sudan, Ethiopia, Myanmar, in places where it's already fallen, you know, I think probably Turkey is still, you know, at the edge of the abyss, but in places where democracy has collapsed completely, I think we're going to see increasing pressures, and maybe in those places, independent media in those countries will not be viable. And we would have to think of alternatives like exile. Like a lot of independent Russian media is now in Lithuania or Latvia, or operating somewhere else. So we need to think creatively about how independent journalism about those countries can be sustained.
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree with Sheila. I tend to be an optimist in terms of the fact that there is an increased acknowledgement of the value of journalism and of the fact that we may lose it. So I think that is not, people appreciate that is not a given. However, for me, from my point of view, the increasing amount of foreign agent laws are a major issues. We see a lot of, like, for IPI has become really difficult to operate in many countries that have strong foreign agent like laws criminalizing foreign agents, supposedly foreign agents, say Russia, say Pakistan, India, different countries. And I think that there is a copycat effect. So this is going to increase. And that will affect the ability of those initiatives that we see globally that are made of major amount of public funds to support independent journalism to be operative in certain countries. So I am very worried about that. I also see that we have seen a lot of news media disappearing, and we will see more disappearing. Maybe we can argue that the market was oversaturated. I don't know, but I do think that we will result with less news media. But maybe on the positive side, I do think that as part of this increased awareness, we also will end up with greater awareness about what is journalism and what is something else, propaganda, disinformation, all of that. So possibly, as I said, I tend to be an optimist, but I do see a very dire situation ahead, premised the positive development that I had mentioned before. But we will need to find a solution to the foreign agent laws or the fact that anybody who is using certain funds is being criticized or even more like defamed on social media to the point that it becomes really difficult to work. And Kaya's experience is a positive one. They were able to turn it to their advantage, but I do think that in many other cases, news organizations are not as skilled as doing that. So yes.
Kaya, any last words?
Yeah,
and this is your last opportunity to say something positive.
No. I mean, I don't want to sound like too pessimistic. I mean, actually, I'm quite an optimist, and I think that, Turkey will not, in terms of labeling media institutions or funded institutions like foreign agents. I mean, this is not Russia. Every country has its unique, its culture, its history, its dynamics, etc. I don't think we will go through that. We are going through something different, and until now we have managed to survive. We will continue to manage to survive, and we will come out of this. And then we will, as a media organization, play an important role in pioneering the use of these new technologies together with good journalism and together with the audience to make sure that journalism as a profession survives, because this is the key thing we want to achieve here. Make sure journalism as a profession survives, because it was about to die here in Turkey. And I'm very optimistic about the future. Technology will help us, and also in the future, these big tech giants, YouTube, Google, Facebook, and all the others, they will give us our fair share of the content we provide for our audience, but they use it and they make money out of it. So in the future, I believe, and we are seeing examples of this, like in Australia, for example, that these tech organizations, in the end, they will start giving out the shares to the independent media organizations.
And that's a very optimistic prophecy and a great note to finish on. I would like to thank all three panelists for their insights, sharing their expertise with us. And I also want to extend my thanks again to my colleagues at Columbia Global Centers, Istanbul and IPI, and also to our excellent interpreters. Many thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.